First of all, Becky, I just want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. I think, like we had talked about before, we often get theory and we don't often get to see and hear from educators what
Mm.
that feels like in practice. And I would just love to open up the floor and ask you, about your literacy journey, um, with regards to science reading and structured literacy.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad that I actually get a chance to talk about this. You know, it's crazy whenever like I'm out somewhere, I just assume people want to talk about science of reading and structured literacy. And somehow I weave it into every conversation that I have, doesn't matter where we're at. So for me, this is like su such a pleasure. Um, I have was a first grade teacher for about 14 years, teaching a mix of whole language and balanced literacy, and having some frustration even after getting my master's in reading. And I have my reading specialist certification, but I wasn't actually practicing that. I was in a first grade classroom. I would hear stories from like this as a first grade teacher. I would hear stories from the second grade teachers. Oh, so and so is like really struggling, and I'm like, really? They they were great in first grade, and this is back when we were using guided reading and teaching them to like memorize their sight words, not really focusing a whole lot on letters and sounds, and that kind of just like stuck with me. I'm like, what is going on? Well, why could they get through first grade easily enough. But yet here we're moving on to second and third grade. And now those kids that were like flying through are struggling. So that was like always in the back of my mind. And I was teaching over at a building just like a mile away, and it was my 14th year there. And I was always like going down to the reading specialists and chatting and being like, okay, what do you think we can do? How can we change this? Do you think maybe they need one-on-one? Do you think they need reading recovery? Like what is the next step for these kids? And a senior teacher who had been teaching in the district for a long time, had been at elementary school and middle school, and was her last year. She was getting ready to retire. And she's like, Becky, I really think, a long time ago, I took these courses, these letters training, and it really taught me about, the science of reading. She's like, I think this would be beneficial for you. Go, because you obviously need more answers to these questions. And I think it will give you some ideas on what to do. So I was kind of like, okay, like didn't even really think anything of it. I was like, whatever, I'll go to these trainings. So I go to these letters training, and the first one I was kind of like, wait, what? You're saying like balanced literacy and whole language is wrong? And
Mm.
I need to be teaching. And I was kind of like shocked and almost, and I can feel it right now, I was kind of almost like sick to my stomach, like
Mm.
leaving this training and being like, wait a second, been doing this for 14 years, and you're
Mm.
telling me that what I've been doing is wrong? And I was a passionate person, passionate about teaching, like giving it my everything. And I walked away a little unsure. I wasn't really sure if I should believe this or not, even though they were pointing out like the research. And so I left there, kind of just like took it in, and then went back because they spread out the modules. That was like September. So when I went back in November, I went to the second module, and that one focused more on letter sound acquisition and phonemic awareness. And I definitely knew there was a need for phonics. We had just implemented Foundations phonics program that year, and I was using it in my classroom. And some kids were really like quickly getting their letters and sounds, and definitely I had some kids still struggling, but I knew at least it was like a step in the right direction. Um, but unfortunately, there wasn't really anything for phonemic awareness. So at this training, they had mentioned it was people like I was sitting with at the training. Somebody's like, "Oh, well, have you heard of this, program called Haggerty?" And this one
Right.
lady was like, "Oh, have you heard of this assessment called the PAST assessment?" I was just like scribbling things down,
Yeah.
and I left and I was like, okay, I think I have $80. I think I can buy this Heggerty thing and see if
Mhm.
I can start implementing that in my classroom. And I did. And that really just taught me like what phonological awareness was. Because up until then, I didn't know. I didn't have
Mhm.
that in our balanced literacy programs and journeys that we had, or ReadyGen that we had just purchased as our um, kind of like our
Yeah.
comprehension, our listening
Right.
and learning strand. And so I was doing that. And then COVID hit and I was home with my three girls, and my middle one, my oldest just read. I just read to her and she just read. And it was like, great, this is easy, no problem.
Yeah.
My middle one, our teacher was telling me she was struggling and she just wasn't able to memorize these sight words. And when she would look at like she would look at the beginning sound, she wasn't always saying the right sound. And I was like, okay, this is weird. Like I did the same thing and it's not working out. So then I decided to find out a little bit more about this phonemic awareness. And honestly, this is crazy, but I literally was just like Googling stuff. And I was on YouTube and I came across David Kilpatrick's one of his conferences out in
Yeah.
Colorado. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I listened to it and I was like, okay, well, I walked away with, okay, there's this thing called orthographic mapping and there's phonemic proficiency. And I have to get my daughter to the phoneme level. So I was like, well, out of curiosity, I had this past assessment in my Google Drive. I'm like, I'm gonna give it to her. And my little one was sitting right next to her. So my 3-year-old is sitting there and my 6-year-old is sitting there. And I start asking my 6-year-old questions of just her deleting parts of syllables and stuff. And she was getting it wrong. I was like, okay, say fantastic. Now say fantastic, but don't say fan. And she didn't get it correct. But my little one, my 3-year-old, said tastic. I was like, what? Wait, how come my 3-year-old is answering correct and my older ones? And then I went to like some phoneme level things. And again, my middle daughter was struggling and my 3-year-old was like deleting initial sound. And I knew right away, I was like, oh, something's wrong. Something is really, really wrong here. And I also knew my 3-year-old like could spell her name, was writing her name, was learning her letters pretty quickly. And, it was just seeming to take my 6-year-old longer. And right there, like as a mom, as parents, you're like, oh my gosh, like something's wrong. I got to get to the bottom of it. It's like going to the doctor.
Right.
I got to get
Yeah.
this diagnosed. I got to figure out what's going on. So I started, I read David Kilpatrick's not Equipped for Success, Assessing, Preventing, and Overcoming Reading Difficulties. And I really
Mhm.
got into like the working memory and RAN and all of that stuff. And I read all about how, if I was going to get her tested, they need to do the CTOP. They need to see if there's a phonological processing going on. And then I read Overcoming Dyslexia by Shayowitz, because again, I was like, I
Yeah.
gotta find out more about this. Like, what is
Right.
going on? And I read that and I was like, yeah, this is Izzy. This is
Mhm.
her. And from that point on, it was like what could I devour? I was like devouring everything I could find because I knew she was struggling and I knew my district was not set up to help her. It just wasn't. The teachers did not know what to do. And I don't fault them because just, a couple months prior, I didn't know what to do. We had foundations, but we didn't have phonemic awareness. We didn't, we weren't incorporating like the writing piece that we needed to do.
Yeah.
So I'm just reading and listening and listening and reading and finding podcasts. And I just like immersed myself because I had a 3-year-old and I didn't want her to struggle like this either. So I knew I had to get on top of it in order to prevent anything for her as best as I could. But I also was like, I'm a first grade teacher. It's my job to
Mhm.
teach kids to read. And I was
Mhm.
actually told when I came back after COVID, they bumped me down to kindergarten. So it was out of desperation, really. Like, you just feel so scared for your own children and you feel so desperate to figure out how to help them. That's what caused the it was craziness. My husband's like, I cannot believe you're listening to this thing again. He's like, I would always have my earbuds and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm listening to this webinar on alphabet instruction. I'm listening to this webinar about vocabulary. I'm listening to this webinar about dyslexia. He's like, oh my gosh, Becky, you won't stop. And I was like, but I can't. Because I know it has to influence my classroom and what I'm doing with them. So that was getting me to get all of like the research and the resources, and that has never ended. Somehow in there, I started being active on Twitter again. And I think it was because of the webinars and stuff. You know, people will put their Twitter handles and stuff at the bottom. And I want to go find out more about like these researchers or these people have published these books. So I started like following them on Twitter. And then anybody had mentioned like science of reading, boom, you got to follow right away. I was like, follow. If they were on a podcast I listened to, boom, I was following them. If they mentioned another person on a podcast, I was looking them up and I was following them. So now my Twitter feed was just like filled with conversations about the science of reading and structured literacy. And I would get like lost in Twitter, like clicking on different webinars and signing up for stuff. And that's really how like my knowledge came about. And yeah, it's evolved over the years. Like I no longer I don't use Equip for Success. I don't use Heggerty. Like I basically create my own list of words for phonemic awareness that matches my phonics pattern. I use letters because I know the using letters, that effect size is way higher than without letters. And that's all because of like the latest podcasts that I've listened to or the latest webinar. Just watched Matthew Burns out of Florida like a couple weeks ago, and he was showing the effect size of letters versus like non-letters, or blending and segmenting their effect size compared to blending, segment, adding, and deleting. And I was like, oh, duh, this is easy. Blending and segmenting. Most bang for your buck right there. Only takes 3 to 4 minutes. That's what I'm doing. But again, I'm like one isolated person, you know, in a school district of many, like 5 elementary schools, and trying to have effect on my colleagues within my building, you know, talking to them about things that I discover and things that I find out. But having that big effect really has only happened through Twitter.
You know, that makes me think about, you know, hearing your whole journey and, you know, fueled by wanting to learn more and kind of dive deeper to understand your daughter more, and then to also understand what practices were really going to, you know, drive your students to make growth in the classroom. And I'm curious, you know, you started talking about how you've kind of changed some of your practices. I'm curious about where are you now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when I started out, my school was using foundations. And within that program, they teach the kids, you know, you have the letter B and then a picture of a bat, I think it is, and then the word bat underneath. And you teach them B, bat, B. And I noticed that when I went to teach the kids to read, to decode, they would look at the letter and they would go B, bat, B, A, apple, A. And I'm like, wait, hold on a second. This is just the letter B. And when we read, we go B. Like, so they were like caught in this letter, keyword, sound type of thing. And I'd seen on a webinar, we don't need that. There's no point in keyword. So chopped that out and got rid of that completely, and even got rid of the picture. So like when I teach letters and sounds, all I show is the letter B. That's it. There's no keyword, there's no picture, anything. We may talk about things that start with a B, and I might have done a whole bunch of phonemic awareness where it was like, okay, B, at, bat, B, I, L, bill, and they're hearing it, but I realized, hey, we don't need a keyword. But what I did incorporate to help those kids that were struggling is embedded picture mnemonics. So, I mean, I have them all sitting down at the bottom of my classroom. You can kind of see them right there below the ledge. Research did say that, hey, this does help poor readers um, when it's embedded into the picture. So I use that to help the kids as a scaffold, but it's just a scaffold. My kids don't know it, but they're going away in December. They're going away when they come back from Christmas break. It's like, we're no longer going to use these. There's a couple ones that are tricky because they're newer, like the diagraphs, but no, we're getting out of the scaffold and we're going to just plain letters. So getting away from the keyword was a huge one. Adding the embedded mnemonic was a huge one. And then listening to Jan Hasbrook all about like fluency. You know, when we think of fluency, we think of like reading and we think of like passages or sentence level fluency, but fluency actually starts in kindergarten. So in order for kids to decode, they have to have automatic letter sound recognition. So I started incorporating a lot of like fluency where I'm flashing the cards and it's like,
Sound drills.
yeah, just like how You Fly has. And we do them both where they see the letter and they have to say the sound, or I say the sound and they have to like write the letter. It's like back and forth. So that automaticity piece was huge. That was a big piece of the learning. And when I go to assess the students on their letter sounds, I actually will not mark it correct unless they can say it within 2 seconds. And if they can't say it within 2 seconds, I'm like, hey, it's just one. We got to practice a little bit more. We still need a little bit more automaticity with that one. Because when they go to decode like CVC, we know we can't have them go, if it's the word bat, we can't have them go, buh.
Are there any practices that have made that alphabetic knowledge more sticky for kids that you've incorporated?
Well, I think the letter sound drill, just like flashing them. And then I will do almost like a dictation. All right, write me the letter that spells the sound B. And they have to write it. And if they don't know it within a few seconds, I'll hold up. Hey, that's letter B. Watch me. Skyline to grass line, trace up, curve around. And there's a ton of explicit handwriting. So that whole like writing it, saying it, seeing it is like boom. It's just constant. It's a constant write, say, see, write, say, see, write it in sand, write it on the carpet, write it on your friend's back. Like, let's make it with Play-Doh. But every time they make it, they write it, anything like that, it's always exactly the same. I'm always using very, very concrete, explicit language with them. We start at the sky, we come down to the grass, we push up to the plane, and we curve around. I never deviate from the way that I show them how to make a letter.
No, but
And
I
I'm
was here, you were talking about how you're really making it sticky. I'm also curious, we talked about how, you've been incorporating some materials from other programs, like the lips cards from Lindamood Bell, or you have a sound wall. We talked about how you've been using the core knowledge, listening and language strand. And I just want to ask you kind of, um, how is the relationship between, what you're doing in the classroom and what the rest of the school is doing? Like, are teachers coming to you for
Mhm.
support? You're curious? Is the district or principal leaders curious? Like, what's that relationship like when you're sort of replacing things with programs that might not be necessarily the program everyone is using?
That's a great question. Um, well, some of the programs, some of the resources, I try not to call them programs, some of the resources that I use, 'cause I don't necessarily stick to a program. I do use Linda Mood Bell. I just like her lips pictures. I don't
Yeah.
really use anything else out of the program. Her lips pictures are just fantastic. They're really big. They're like 8 by 10. And when it shows the articulation, if it's a stop sound, like t or d, it shows a puff of air. But if it's a continuous sound, like S or Z, it has lines coming out to show the sound continuing. And and I know for my kids, like CH and SH, the only difference is the stop and the continuous. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really important that they have that clear visual when they're
Yeah.
looking at that lips card. Oh, it's CH because it stopped, Mrs. Pallone. It was a stop. I'm like, yeah, write the CH. I'm not just using it because it's something to use. There's really
Right.
like a clear purpose
That's right.
why I have chosen those particular pictures. We do have the kid lips pictures um for our sound wall and our vowel valley for the consonant. And I do have them up, and as we learned irregular words, we place them up there underneath the correct sound. And Linda Mood Bell, unfortunately, doesn't have some of the sounds that Kid Lips does have. So I kind of like pick it up with that and use some of the Kid Lips in there. But
Mm-hmm.
it is so clear to the kids. And you can kind of see them up. You see them up
Mm-hmm.
there. They're
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's so clear to the kids,
Yeah.
like which is which, because it's the instruction has been so explicit. So that's not something the whole district uses. That's a
Yeah.
me thing. And I haven't really gotten any pushback from that, because I think they understand, like, they want articulation taught with the letters and sounds, and that's what I'm doing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
teaching articulation with letters and sounds. And I still have they provided us with Mary Dahlgren's tools, lips. So I have that up in my classroom, and it's definitely used for the whole, like the vowel valley, as Linda Mood Bell only really has like 3 pictures of vowels up there. So the other one is a lot clearer. When it comes to the phonics, we right now have foundations. And I did write a proposal to my assistant superintendent asking if I could deviate from some of the practices and foundations and incorporate both the skills of unit 1 and 2 of core knowledge, because they did a lot with left and right and pre-writing strokes. And I knew that was really, really important for the kindergartners and their fine motor. So I kind of like incorporated that in the beginning of the year. And then they were okay with that, which was great. And, I know the foundation scope and sequence. And, the sad thing is, if you're using that right now, kids aren't reading yet. Like, they don't really read until like January,
Yeah.
whereas as soon as I had a vowel and a couple continuous consonants up, and
And
my kids could blend 3 sounds, we were reading 3
right.
sounds.
Right.
And that's the same thing with Hegarty. It's when you don't have anything, okay, it's the best thing that you have because you don't have anything.
Right.
But like now, if you know better, kids need to get to that phoneme level as soon as they can. Like, I tweaked it again, and my scope and sequence is like, hey, we're going to do about like a week of compounds just to get down that we can manipulate sounds. We can manipulate things, and we can delete things from words, and we can have smaller pieces. And then we're going to do about like a week of syllables and see if we can, get really good at this. And then when syllables are done, boom, we're into body coda. And we're in body coda because body coda takes the first sound and the vowel and puts them together, and it makes it really easy for kids to hear. So if the word's cab, they go cab, and it doesn't really force their working memory to hold 3 sounds. It only forces it to hold 2. And so by like the 4th week of school, my kids were into 2 phonemes, and we were blending and segmenting 2 phonemes because I knew this is where we got to get. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and like, you guys, I'm sure, have seen Anita Archer like many times.
Mm.
So I took the I do, we do, you do, and I was like, this is how you do it. Even if, they're not catching on right away, it's going to be me, 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 you, do repeat me, repeat me, repeat me, repeat me. And boom, by like that 4th day, they got it. And
But there'll be some people say what you just said, me, you, back and forth, back and forth. There's
yeah,
some people who say, oh, kids not gonna like that. That's gonna be boring for them. Like that type
yeah,
of pedagogy is just not like how do you are the kids in your class bored or are they excited? Can you give me a sense of the
yeah.
vibe in your classroom, the culture in your
Yeah,
classroom?
I wish I could like show you some videos on Twitter. They are so engaged because I think when you're working with the 5-year-old, you just make it fun. Hey guys, I'm going to try to say a word, but I'm going to take away a piece of this word and let's see if you can figure it out. Let's see if you can outsmart Mrs. Pallone. Like, you have to like be like that. And you have to be like, if you show fun and love
Yeah.
and excitement, they are going to think it's fun and they're going to love it. And they're going to think it's so
I think that's
exciting.
almost with any subject, though. Like, I'm sure if you talk to a
Yeah.
chemistry teacher, they probably say the same thing, or a biology teacher is the same type of thing. For
Yeah,
some
for
reason,
sure.
we think that the content itself is what makes something exciting or boring. I mean, a little bit, sure, but learning to
Yeah.
read, oh my God, what could be more exciting than that for a kid who's 5 years old, or even a kid who's 15 years old? Like, that
Yeah.
is so
And
exciting for a kid.
I have a little student and he is English as a second language and he sits right in front. And today we finished up our blending and I taught them, about CK and how it's used at the end of the word with a short vowel. And he's like, oh, I'm going to school. And I'm like, buddy, you just made my day. I love that you
Oh
love
man.
like
Yeah.
doing this.
Yeah.
And I think it is. I think it's like, hey, I taught 5 senses in the beginning of the year. Honestly, it's not always super exciting, especially when I was using something from core knowledge and it was about smell receptors. And I said to them, guys, I'm going to talk about boogers and mucus. And they were like, they just grabbed it. And they were so excited to learn about their
Yeah.
nose because I brought out things that were like gross and disgusting. Think you just have to remember your audience and again but I also, it's not all me. Like, I go back to that Anita Archer. Like, if I say something and then I see like they're starting to be like antsy, I'm like, hey, go turn and tell your buddy about your time that you were really sick and you felt that your smell receptors were blocked. I bet you all have had a time that your smell receptors were blocked. Go ahead and tell them. And then like I'll turn away and they're all chitty and chatty and they're like, hey, yeah, I had all these boogers and I had to blow my nose. And then we're back.
Right.
And I don't know. I just, some of it, I go back to, I think it's natural, but I also think you have to know your age group. Like, I watch Kair on Twitter with the middle school students, and I look and I'd be like, I could never do that. Like, the way he interacts with those middle school kids, he just has a knack for getting them to produce and be engaged and listen to all that, he has going on in his reading class in his classroom. And I'm like, nope, yeah, that's not me. But, you give me like 20 to 100 5-year-olds, no problem. Like, I'll have them all sitting, listening, and completely engaged within a couple minutes because it's just, I don't know, that part is just like natural, I feel like. But it's also a little bit, it's science of learning. It's like, hey, how do you get kids to, learn? You got to engage them. You got to give them opportunities to speak and all that good stuff. I just wanted to say, when it came to like, we talked a lot about like the phonics side of the rope and changing things around. I did want to mention that my school district has Ready Gen, which is a balanced literacy program. And when I did my Goyen Fellowship last year, I did write a proposal to incorporate the only thing I knew I could find for free, which was core knowledge, language arts. I incorporated their listening and learning strands into my Ready Gen themed topics. And I got special permission for that. And I still get emails from parents from 2 years ago saying, Mrs. Pallone, I still have to take my kids on this trip to the Statue of Liberty. And Dad was begging me to take him out to Mount Rushmore because when you guys learned about it in kindergarten, that's the only thing he wants to do. He wants to go out and see these 4 presidents out there. And I think, by giving them actual content and like incorporating it with what we already had that maybe wasn't so interesting, it really like engaged those students. And honestly, Cream, like in my heart, I couldn't do it. I couldn't just do Ready Gen. Like, I knew it wasn't like all that those kids needed. I knew they needed more content. I knew they needed more science. I knew they needed more social studies. I looked at like my classroom that year and my daughter was in my classroom. And here's a kid who is fortunate. like she's been to Washington, D.C. 4 times, and she's been down to Florida, and she's gone to New York City and the Statue of Liberty, and she was up at Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts. And then I had kids sitting in my classroom that probably didn't leave my town. And to
So
me, it was like, no
when
question.
you guys have Ready Gen now, but you're replacing it next year, you said. What do you guys have they decided what they're going to replace it with?
The proposal right now is bookworms for our
Man,
content.
okay. Okay. Do you have a sense of I know a lot about that one. What's your sense of it? Why they make that choice?
Um, well, I wasn't on
Are
the
you familiar?
committee.
Are you familiar with that one?
I am. I am. I did look it up a lot. I I felt when I went through, I actually went through all the modules K to 5 when they were deciding to get it. And I did feel like it had some great literature for grades 3, 4, 5. I felt like I thought it was a little bit more theme based than the way that I wanted to go, especially because I had been using core knowledge, and I just thought core knowledge was very sequential. I could see from like K to 5 how I started with the entire world, and then I did like Native Americans, Columbus, explorers, first grade, colonial America, first grade picked up with American independence, second grade picked up with the War of 1812. I could see like this historical sequence like laid out in
Or not
front
was
of
like that?
me.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
I was really attracted to that part of it. When I looked at K2 for bookworms, I didn't see that. And I saw
Mhm.
like Biscuit goes to the library, and
Yeah,
Miss
yeah, the biscuit books.
Bindergarten gets ready for kindergarten, and Lola loves the library. And I just wasn't seeing, I was seeing like some good literature. I just wasn't seeing that, like that content, that like really strong social studies, really strong historical like timeline.
Mhm.
And that was just
Yeah,
my opinion.
core knowledge is probably the best for that because, I mean, that's the whole E.D. Hirsch line from K all the way up is
Yeah.
they're very clear and in all the different subjects. And if you spiral it, if you go one grade level at a time, you're very intentional. You
Mm-hmm.
don't skip things, and you're
Yeah.
building it intentionally. It really helps because you've got the ability to access complex text because you built so much content knowledge.
Yes.
As long as everybody's on board with that content, there's some
Yeah.
places like, oh my God, War of 1812, we can't, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. And core knowledge was like, I think the other top one in our district. And I think it scared people,
yeah,
people that hadn't, and it was kind of sad because I had experience with it because I'd written the proposal and used pieces of it, but I, I wasn't asked my opinion. So like it kind of like that part kind of was like a bummer. I do think I could have had a lot to say on that,
yeah.
but
I mean,
I mean,
districts will wrestle with this, and I think there's no right answer, but in different contexts, different curricula will fit. There are some
yeah,
places that just adore core knowledge. They want that deep, rich content, that material all throughout the curriculum. There's others who just
yeah.
say, "Give me the results. I just need the kids to read the best. Give me bookworms. Let's go." So
Hmm.
it just depends, and I don't think there's a wrong answer to that. But I'm glad that you lifted
Yeah,
that up.
Yeah.
yeah.
And you were also talking about how 95% group is going to replace the foundational skills portion
Yeah,
of the.
yeah, I'm actually really excited about that. I've been following 95% group for the past couple years because they had like these phonics chip kits the one year, and I had out of my own money, I'd purchased one of them and used it for like a little bit of private tutoring. But I like kind of how I was getting the kids to blend earlier and to start reading earlier. That's what 95% group does. Once kids have so many consonants and have at least, I think, the letter A vowel, they get them, as long as they're, again, to me, as long as their phonemic awareness is there, they can hear the sounds to put them together. They can then, and they have that automaticity of the letter sounds. then they can read words. Like, why not have them read words with 2 sounds and words with 3 sounds that follow that short pattern? So I think that's a great choice for our school. And here's the problem, and this is, you guys, we're not all there yet. Even though we have been letters trained, that's it. We all went and sat in 6, 7, 8 PDs, full day PDs for letters. That was it. There's been no follow-up. There's been no de-implementation of our past resources. Nobody has walked into those classrooms and really have taken out that FMP benchmark assessment kit. Yes, most people have gotten rid of their guided reading books. Most people aren't using guided reading, and I put that in quotes. They're doing small group instruction, but that de-implementation stage, we glossed over that. And the follow-up on the PD, it's not there. And
Never
that's
heard
why
anyone put it that way. Never heard anyone say it like that. The de-implementation phase. I've never heard it put quite like that.
Oh, it's not me. I that was a podcast that I listened to. Of course. Yeah, that's what I can even like send it to you. It was the de-implementation of something. I think it was Amplify did it, and the Science of Reading podcast. And yeah, we never said that, hey, this is really no longer lining up with philosophically and what the research is saying. We need to push these practices aside. It's almost like, okay, not this, but this. Not this, instead this. Not this, instead this. And so we're at this stage where we've been trained by letters, so we know there's these other things that we need to do, but we don't know how to do them because that's scary. Like, how do I use a decodable reader in my classroom? Well, like, how do I just use blending and segmenting? You guys gave me Heggerty. Aren't I supposed to do all these things that are in Heggerty? Wait, now you're telling me I only should do blending and wait, now you're telling me I should do it with letters? Wait, how am I going to do this with letters? Isn't that funny? So we have like all of that going on. And so I don't think anything is really big. And I could be wrong, but from what I like talking to my colleagues in other buildings, I think people are reaching back for what's comfortable again. Like somebody said their sound wall was up, but they put it up like an alphabet, like A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, because we've reverted back because we don't know how to use the sound wall. Maybe we're not comfortable with like articulation and why these sounds are, you know, the fricatives are all here. And so I don't know how you get there now, honestly, because I mean, I'm not in control of that. And I'm not saying I should be in control of it or anything, but I do think, how do you take a step back and say, hey, you know, yeah, we did a great thing. And we got these teachers to understand that not all of our practices that we were using were the best practices. And there's really this science that we should follow. But how do we translate that into their rooms?
Well, I love, I
No.
think what's interesting is you're like, I don't have control over that. However, within your locus of control, and I think teachers feel this way too, like what is in my sort of power of influence? And there
Mhm.
has been some things that you've done within your role to have influence. Like, for example, you talking about how you wrote the district to call to have all the teachers letter trained in K-5. Like, can you talk a little bit about like, what's next? What's your role of influence in your system?
Well, after I went to that second letters, I wrote over to a colleague at the district office and said, hey, can we like chat about reading instruction? I just went to this awesome training. I think it would be great if we had more teachers trained in this. And so they came over and visited at the school, and I talked to them all about letters, and she was totally on board. They both were. I think money was an issue at that time. And then after COVID, we had some money. And I don't remember exactly what it came from, but there was money. And so that's when they implemented. I was just getting ready. I had a whole letter written out again, and I was about to send it to the superintendent. And no, actually I did. I did send it out to him, and I got a reply back from somebody in district office saying, hey, Becky, I just wanted to let you know, we are starting to train all the teachers in letters this year. Your first one will be in September. I was like, oh, great. That's wonderful.
Man, score.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
That's huge.
that was awesome. And then that was a little bit of like district influence that I feel like I had, just bringing the knowledge of letters, that there is this thing called letters to the district. And then the second piece was just a kind of like respect in my own building, you know. I do have like K1 and 2, they all in the reading specialist. Like we have a really good relationship, and they're all often popping down here and asking questions. I've gone into the other kindergarten classroom and I've modeled foundational skills a couple times on how to like keep it upbeat and fast and keep it going. I've gone into a first grade classroom this year and I got to model phonemic awareness for her because she was coming down from fourth grade and wasn't really, you know, used to it. But honestly, I think my biggest influence is Twitter. I've just received, you know, before I started Goyen, I was telling David said that I had like 350 followers. And then when I started posting all of these videos, that's what people were really into. They could care less about like what I write on there or even pictures. They're like, okay, we'll look at a picture. But as soon as they see it in action, I mean, I went up like 4,000 followers, like in the matter of
What's your Twitter handle? What's your Twitter so people will know?
at Mrs. Pallone.
Okay. We'll make sure we post it up too.
Yeah. So, and then I started getting like a bunch of messages in my inbox asking me about, a lot of people are curious. They're like, what curriculum are you using? What curriculum are you using? What's that curriculum? What's that curriculum? And that one was a hard one to answer because I'd say to them, okay, well, I'm not really using a particular curriculum. I'm embedding like automaticity of letter sounds, explicit handwriting instruction, embedded mnemonics. I was like trying to tell them, like I'm grabbing at all of this research and kind of, I'm taking the letters template that I learned on how to like build a foundational skills time. And I'm kind of like plugging in like resources and things that I know they need, like articulation. And they were just like the video on like continuous blending, people were like obsessed with. That was the one where instead of saying all three sounds, instead of going like b, at, I go sound, b, sound, at, blend, bat, bat. Because teachers were like, oh my gosh, this is how my kids will be able to hold on to three sounds. Like they were just so excited by that practice when they saw that. And that was because of a webinar I watched with Selena Gonzalez Fry when she was talking about continuous phonation, and she was talking about like using body code. I was like, you know what? I'm going to use this in my classroom. I'm going to show the kids how to decode words this way, kind of scaffold them to put the first two sounds together, then tack on the third sound. And when they're ready, they'll just blend. And they did. When they were ready, they could hold all three sounds and they would just do all three sounds, or they had the automaticity to just say, okay, that's the word back. So I think Twitter, like certainly I think is the most influential because people want to see it. They can read about it, they can hear about it, but how do you do it is the question.
Right.
It's that how. Like, what does it look like? How is this all going to be put together?
What kind of results have you seen in your class as a result of the shifts that you've made?
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I think I was we use Dibbles for our composite. So I was at 89% of the kids made composite. And last year it was 92. So yeah, it was.
That deserves a celebration.
Good stuff. I mean, right now, 60% of my kids can segment 53 sounds in 1 minute. And that's the advanced part of Dibbles.
Yeah.
And then 75% of my kids can name, because I track all this data, to name over 42 letter names within 1 minute. And that's the highest you can go in
And
dibbles.
this is before the holiday break. This is, the
Yeah.
beginning of December.
And I
Wow.
honestly, I haven't checked. Actually, I'm gonna pull out my actual, like, how many can actually like read words, decoding. Yeah, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 of my 20 have hit the end of the year decoding. So yeah, and it's plugging away letter sounds. Like, it's just taking all that research and just sticking it together and giving them the best possible instruction, like, that I can, you know. And again, I always have my daughter in the back of my head. I always have my middle daughter sitting there being like, oh, if she had this, I got to give everybody this, because like, I guarantee if she had like a pretty strong foundation, her struggle wouldn't have been as hard. She's definitely over the hump. She'll never not be dyslexic. We know that. But she reads. And because of, go ahead.
You really have me thinking, because I have a kid that's dyslexic too, so I understand. But do you ever think about? I mean, it sounds like when your daughter was struggling, it really was a watershed moment for you in your career and how you approach reading and your study. But what if that hadn't happened? I mean, you ever think about that? Like,
Yeah.
what would
Yeah.
have happened if your daughter hadn't, shown these signs of struggle or difficulty or whatever? What would have happened in terms of your profession as a person teaching reading? Have you ever thought about that?
Actually, it was hard for her to understand that she was different. Like, why wasn't reading easy for me like it was for the oldest and even for the youngest? And I said, Izzy, God gave me you like this for a reason. He made it so that you could teach me how to teach other kids. There's a reason that I was gifted with you and you were gifted with this struggle. And it's also a gift that you understand your struggle. And she's now at the place that she can articulate that to other people. And when she has kids in her classroom and she says to them, she's like, yeah, this is hard for me, but like, I know that I have to, really hear the sounds that I'm spelling in my words, and I have to slow it down. And, if you're struggling too, and like, it's no longer an obstacle, which it was the first couple of years, that she didn't want to pick up a book. She didn't want to meet with her tutor. And that's the fortunate thing. She had private tutoring. She didn't want to do any of that. Where now it's like it defines her. She actually, I don't mean to bring this in, but she has to choose a saint for her church thing. And she's like, Mom, is there a saint of like dyslexia, saint of learning disabilities? Because
Oh man.
she's like, that's me.
Yes.
I want to be named after that. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, so it's so nice that she's taken it on as like,
Yeah.
this is not something that has defined her. It's something that, that's held her back. It's something that this is who she is. This is who I am through this. So
And the
I'm
impact that's had
blessed.
on you. Yeah, the impact that had
Yeah.
on you and your practice as a teacher and all the kids that you're teaching now and that you're gonna teach down the road. Like, you can't, that's hard to, I can't even, like, that's just hard to add up and quantify, you
And she
know.
always says to me, she's like, when she hears me tell this story, she's like, you're going to tell the story about me, Mom, and how you learned how to do all of this because of me. And I'm like, yeah, baby, I am. I am going
Yeah.
to tell the story of you and how proud I am that you had this and you taught me to be better than I am. So,
Such a powerful message. Becky, I just want to thank you so much for this time together, for allowing us to share your journey and your learnings and all of your insights in this process. And we'll definitely be, sharing your Twitter page and resources that you recommend. But just want to close us out with what's on your heart and mind and a message that you want to give to educators or your advice for them.
I think it can be overwhelming, but I think it's small steps. Like, hey, how can I, just change this one tiny aspect of my instruction. And then once you feel like you have that down, okay, now how can I like tweak this a little bit? And don't be afraid to take a risk. You know, it's sometimes you're going to fail and a lesson's going to fail, or what you tried to do is going to fail, but get right back up there and tweak it and do it a little bit different. And I think as educators, we know that with everything that we teach, there's that, you know, that vulnerability, and the kids don't really know any better. At least the 5-year-olds don't know any better. And if you really want to be better, honestly, you can't expect somebody to give it to you, to feed it to you. You can't expect your district to provide all the PD. There's so much free out there. Just a simple podcast, webinars. There's a ton at PaTTAN Literacy Symposium, all on YouTube for free. And all you have to do is make it a priority. Click it and listen.
Any upcoming ventures that we should know about, or things that's happening with you?
Yes, I'm very excited to say that I will be on Melissa and Lori Love Literacy, the podcast. February 16th is the air date, and that one is all about phonemic awareness. So I get to talk about the journey that I kind of had learning about phonemic awareness and where I was and where I am today, and give you some practical tips that you can use in your own classroom.
In addition to Twitter and some of the other places, it's my understanding that you're also going to have other opportunities to kind of spread the word and share your experiences. There's more. What else you got?
There's more. Yeah, I was contacted by PaTTAN, which is Pennsylvania Assistant Technical. Sorry, I don't know the exact terminology. But they do a literacy symposium every 2 years. So I will be presenting at their June 2024 Literacy Symposium. I'm going to talk about science of reading, structured literacy from a K-1 perspective, both sides of Scarborough's reading rope, language comprehension and word recognition. I'm really excited. Practical classroom put right into use.
Yeah, love it. Anything else, David?
No, you know more than I do.
Listen, I think it's fantastic. People want to know what to do, and they're on their learning journey, just like you were, and you are. We all are. So to be able to listen to other people's story and share their expertise and the things they've learned along the way that have worked for them, it's invaluable. Thank you for just being open and sharing and just being forthcoming, and for the resources. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully people see it's doable. Like I'm not anything spectacular. I'm just a classroom teacher that was like, hey, I need to know more. And we all can be like that. We all can be like, hey,
we were gonna get along before you said that. I think a classroom teacher who was doing the best they can, I think that is spectacular. I think what it takes to be a teacher who's getting kids to read, you realize you're changing the trajectory. I don't want, but you're changing the trajectory of kids' lives, kids, families, communities. I'm not into the whole glitz and glam and you got to win this award and that award. Just regular people getting it day after day. They come in, they're prepared. First of all, they have time to prepare, but they prepare, they have the materials right, and they go after those kids. Man, that's I just think I don't know. We just don't, as a society, really appreciate the value and the worth of that type of public service. It's our whole everything depends on that. So you in there getting it like that on a daily basis, hey, you a hero to me. And I just want to keep up the good work. Don't take a backseat to anybody on that. I'll take you over a quarterback for the Raiders, and I'm a big Raiders fan. I'll take you over quarterback for the Raiders any day. Real talk.
Oh, thank
You're a hero
you.
to me. So thank you. Appreciate you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It was really nice talking to you, both of you, and I appreciate this opportunity to tell the story.
Thank you.